Today, we're diving deep into a pivotal moment in Indian history, the Government of India Act of 1858. Now, this wasn't just some dusty piece of legislation. It was a complete game changer. It marked the end of a company's rule and the formal, undeniable beginning of the British Raj. Let's get right into it.
To really get the Act of 1858, you have to rewind the clock just 1 year, to 1857. The great uprising of that year wasn't just a rebellion. It was a fire that engulfed the subcontinent and torched the very foundations of the East India Company's rule. It became painfully obvious to the British Parliament that the old way of doing things was broken, and something new, something far more direct and powerful, had to rise from those ashes.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the context, that massive 1857 uprising. Then we'll break down the Act's key provisions, piece by piece. After that, we'll look at the Queen's Proclamation, which was a huge part of this story. Then we'll switch gears for a critical mains analysis, understand the Act's lasting legacy, and wrap it all up with a high-yield recap for that quick pre-exam revision.
Okay, let's kick off with Section 1. You know, for any UPSC exam, the why is just as crucial as the what. And the why behind this act is, without a doubt, the monumental revolt of 1857.
Now, a quick chronology alert here. The journey to this act wasn't exactly smooth sailing. The revolt kicks off in May 1857. By February 1858, the British Prime Minister, Lord Palmerston, tables a bill to take over. But then, plot twist, his government falls. So it's actually his successor, Edward Stanley, who gets the final bill passed. And here is a date you absolutely need to remember, a high-yield prelims fact. The act got royal assent on August 2nd, 1858. Lock that date in.
To really burn this into your memory, let's use a memory anchor. Think of this act as a corporate liquidation. Its main job was to dissolve the East India Company's role as a ruler. I want you to picture this. The company's merchant flag, which had flown over India for a century, is being slowly, decisively lowered. And in its place, the actual crown of Britain is physically placed right onto the map of India. That single image, that's the whole story of this transfer of power.
All right, moving on to Section 2. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the Act, the actual machinery of imperial control that the British constructed.
So, the very first thing the Act did was kill the double government system. This messy, complicated setup with a board of control and a court of directors, often pulling in different directions, was completely scrapped. Now pause here for a second and try to recall, which act established this system in the first place? If you're thinking of Pitt's India Act of 1784, you are absolutely correct. Well, the 1858 Act just wiped that entire slate clean.
So if that dual system was gone, what came next? A brand new, incredibly powerful office was created, the Secretary of State for India. And this is crucial. This wasn't just some administrator. The Secretary of State was a full-fledged member of the British cabinet, a top-tier minister who was directly accountable to the British Parliament for literally everything that happened in India.
The Secretary of State, or SOS, basically inherited all the powers of the old board and the court combined. Now, he was given a 15-member Council of India to help him out. But, and this is a big but, this council was purely advisory. The real power, the final say, rested with the Secretary of State. He could, and often did, overrule his council on almost any matter.
And here's our second memory anchor to show you just how absolute his authority was. Let's call it the SOS secret telegram. The act gave the Secretary of State this incredible power. He could send secret instructions and orders directly to the top official in India without his own 15-member council ever seeing them. This was the ultimate tool for centralized top-down control straight from London.
Okay, so what was happening in India? Well, here we have a classic prelims trap. The post of Governor General wasn't abolished. No, it was redesignated. He got a fancy new title, the Viceroy of India. And that title, Viceroy, meant he was the personal representative of the Crown. The man who had to navigate this huge shift, the stoic Lord Canning, became India's very first Viceroy.
The 1857 revolt had started in the army, right? So military reforms were obviously a top priority. A new, crystal-clear chain of command was put in place. At the very top, you have the British Crown. Orders flow down to the Secretary of State in London. He directs the Viceroy in India, and here's the key change. The military boss, the commander-in-chief, was now made subordinate to the Viceroy. This ensured civilian authority over the army, a lesson the British learned the hard way.
Okay, on to Section 3. The Act provided the new skeleton of the government, but the British desperately needed to put some flesh on those bones. They needed to pacify India. And that was the whole point of the Queen's Proclamation, which Lord Canning read out at a grand durbar in Allahabad. Think of it as the mission statement for the new Raj.
This one line pretty much sums up the entire promise of the proclamation. It was a pledge of equality, of fairness, of justice for all. For a population still reeling from the brutality of the revolt and its suppression, this was an incredibly powerful message. So powerful, in fact, that many Indian leaders at the time called it the Magna Carta of the people of India.
So what were these big promises? Well, the proclamation assured non-interference in religious beliefs, a direct response to one of the major triggers of the 1857 revolt. It also guaranteed the rights and territories of the Indian princes, and it officially confirmed the policy of open competition for the Indian Civil Services, or ICS, implying that any Indian could, in theory, join the elite administration based on merit.
And just to give you a sense of the scale of this policy toward the princes, look at this number. Over 560. More than 560 princely states had their rights and their territories guaranteed. The only condition, they had to accept British suzerainty, meaning they accepted the Queen as their ultimate overlord. In one brilliant political move, the British turned potential rivals into loyal allies, the future pillars of their empire.
All right, we've got the provisions down. Now for Section 4. Let's put on our analyst hats. This is where we move past the what happened and into the what did it really mean, the critical perspectives you absolutely need for your mains answers.
Here's your first mains-ready insight. Despite all the drama about the Crown taking over, the Act was mostly a change in the management back in London. For the average Indian on the ground, the district collector, the police, the courts, the basic structure of the government they interacted with didn't really change much at all. A great line for a mains answer is this: it was more a change of masters than a change in the methods of mastery.
Your second insight is all about the nature of this new rule. Let's be very clear. The Act of 1858 introduced zero elements of Indian participation or democracy. In fact, it did the opposite. It perfected a system of absolute imperial control, highly centralized, totally top-down, and intensely bureaucratic. This is the real beginning of what historians call the steel frame of the British Raj, an administration run by officials for the empire with absolutely no input from the Indian people.
And here's a massive economic point, directly linked to the drain of wealth theory. So, this brand new, expensive London office, the powerful Secretary of State, his 15 council members, their staff, their building. Who paid for it all? Not the British taxpayer. The entire cost was charged directly to the revenues collected from India. This is a textbook example of colonial exploitation, and it's a point you have to mention in any critical analysis.
Okay, moving to Section 5. Let's zoom out. What's the big picture here? What was the lasting significance of this act on the next 90 years of Indian history?
Think of the 1858 Act as the foundation slab poured for the entire structure of the British Raj. It wasn't just a reaction to the revolt. It was a proactive move that set the constitutional and administrative blueprint for the next 9 decades. Every major law that followed, all the way up to the giant Government of India Act of 1935, was essentially built on top of the centralized, parliamentary-controlled system that was locked in place right here in 1888.
And finally, we've arrived at Section 6. We've gone through a lot of detail, so let's consolidate everything into the most essential, high-yield facts that you can carry with you straight into the exam. All right, let's do a rapid-fire recap. What's the key date? August 2nd, 1858. The new top boss in the UK, the Secretary of State. His superpower? The secret telegrams. The new title for the head in India? Viceroy. And the first one? Lord Canning. The key military change? Commander-in-Chief now reports to the Viceroy. And the biggest catch? The whole London setup was paid for by India, with zero Indian representation. Simple. Now to make sure all of this really sticks, be sure to visit the website. The link is right there in the description to get our high-yield notes and a really helpful, colorful mind map on the Government of India Act 1858.